I am really excited for this morning. I would like to, first of all, thank the Baltimore School for the Arts for having us in this gorgeous space. I feel really lucky to be here and have such great venues around the city. So thank you, Carter, for having us today. So robots, as you remember, you probably maybe noticed that the rest of the world is celebrating Revolution this month, but we switched themes. So last month was Revolution, we're doing robots now. So thus all that, so we don't have some confusion. So, Terry and Belinda Kilby, Elevated Element. We're getting a really big treat today. As you can see, things are happening with robots, and it's awesome. And it kind of makes me nervous, but I like it. So, Elevated Element, it was born out of Terry and Belinda's sort of complementary expertise. So Terry came from the robotics tech world and sort of his love of remote-controlled things. That's like my language for Belinda coming from the art world and sort of understanding a lot about things like Japanese art and sort of how that often would take sort of the bird's eye view of something. And so they have this really beautiful story of her having sort of a light bulb moment of seeing him run this drone camera and going, oh my God, this is gorgeous. Like, what an amazing thing to be able to capture images and landscape in real time. And, you know, it's really funny. They're a hilarious couple to really watch in action. I've had the privilege of being on shoot with them a couple times. And they have like a really funny dynamic, which I'm not sure it's going to come across today or not, but just trust me on that. And it's also just really fun to see because they have these like things and you're like staring over their shoulder like they're a really annoying person, but they don't seem annoyed at all. And the footage that comes out of it is really beautiful. And I think one of the things that's most exciting for me as I watch them work and hear about how they talk about this and see their work is that they're sort of changing the language and the connotations around this big, heavy word drone. And what I think is historically been considered something really dark and heavy is becoming something that is related to beautiful landscapes and footage of things that we've just never really been able to see in detail or the way we've seen them before. So please give a giant round of applause to Terry and Belinda Kilby. Can you get it? We're going to do a demo. This is going to be really exciting. Yeah, sure. So Terry and Belinda work in tandem as they fly their drone. Do you guys have a name for this drone? I didn't hear that. So what you're seeing on screen is actually coming from this little camera here. Oh, man. It's surprisingly windy. We're not going to bring it out over the crowd because I feel like there's liability issues concerned, but it's incredibly windy and a really kind of exciting piece. So as you can see, stuff like this ballroom is a really good example of stuff that is really, really difficult and expensive. Yeah, it's really expensive to get footage of without something like this. What's up, Jessica? Belinda, I feel like you're probably not used to being the one in the photo. a drone similar to this is the one that is the kind that, what's his name, got his finger chopped off with. Yeah, right? It's badass. All right, enjoy.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Thank you very much, Katie. We appreciate the warm welcome. The topic this morning, robots. What is cooler than a robot? A drone, a robot, a UAV, they have a lot of different names. We're constantly asked what we call them. We usually just call them the kids, or copters, or...
It used to be the other woman until I got my own controller.
So we do actually give them names. So we just before we actually get started on the slides, one important thing to point out is that we do fly aircraft, and that is a big part of what we do. But we kind of got started in this early on, and we had to actually design and make our own. So the three that you see sitting down here on the front are actually our own designs, and we design them at home, and we build them in our garage. We don't really have the normal garage that you may think of when you hear the word garage, but we have a small prototyping lab that we've built. So if you guys get a chance when the talk is done, please stop by and take a look. We name them all after constellations. This one's Sirius. We have Little Dipper in the middle for obvious reasons, and that's Cygnus out there on the end. And the Inspire one that we've bought, which is an off-the-shelf unit, we actually named that one as well too, and that one's called Pleiades. So we just like to name them after constellations. So, again, as we said, we are a husband and wife team. We do mainly aerial photography, but we've also branched out into other areas as well, including mapping and 3D modeling. We started working with this technology in about 2010. At that time, there really was no off-the-shelf kits, as we mentioned earlier, and we had to actually sit down and design and build these things ourselves. And when I say we started in the early days, we were literally ripping apart Nintendo Wii controllers to build flight controllers for these things. So it was very early on.
Okay, we also have been featured in many media outlets on the local level, the national level, and even internationally. It's really fun to see yourself overdubbed in Chinese, which is cool. And so we've just been really embraced and supported by Baltimore, and also want to give a quick shout out to the Baltimore School for the Arts. Thank you very much, and to Baltimore City Schools, where I spent 10 years. So that was fun. Once we have been involved with doing aerial photography for a couple years, we found ourselves with a body of work. And so we decided to release what we believe, that we know of, that we've done our research, to be the first photo book shot entirely with UAVs. And this was also in conjunction with the Baltimore Office of Promotions in the Arts. Were gracious enough to offer us a show at the World Trade Center in the Inner Harbor, and so that was our launch and kickoff of the book, and the perspective from the World Trade Center was perfect for the show and for the subject matter of our work, because it was the same point of view, the bird's eye view, that we love so much.
Plus, that's just such a beautiful view of the city from up there. Just to show something real quick, this was a photo from, we were in Entrepreneur magazine earlier in the year. I believe it was a February issue. We worked with a fabulous Mike Basher photographer to do the shoot. They've got the 3 aircraft that you see here. This is kind of the behind the scenes shot, and then up in the corner, the inset there, you see what actually ended up going out. So we spent a lot of time rigging those things up so that they looked right. There's no way we could actually fly them and get that shot, so we had to rig it up and Photoshop it and hope for the best. So why use aerial robots? Why use a drone? What's the benefit here? This technology's kind of been around for a little while, but why use this?
Okay, in the robotic world, there's the 3 Ds, what's dull, dirty, or dangerous. So anytime you have a job that is dull, dirty, or dangerous, it's best to send a robot in to do the work. And so we are able to stay safely on the ground while the robot goes out and flies to do the dangerous mission, or to be able to, do something that would ordinarily put a human in harm's way. Also being able to access areas that weren't previously available. If you imagine like a really dense rainforest or a desert, that it would be very difficult to get through that terrain without a lot of, days worth of packing gear and time consuming and just dangerous and difficult, then send the drone out.
Yeah, it also gives us a unique perspective, right? I mean, sometimes you don't have to be 300 feet in the air to get something that looks a little different. Sometimes just putting a camera 50 feet up as opposed to being on the ground makes all the difference in the world. So it kind of gives us that bird's eye view. And it also helps provide life for, if you're strictly speaking about photography, it helps provide life to kind of tired subject matter. And we'll show some examples of that here in a moment. To speak to the danger side of things, I'm sure many of you probably remember a little over a year ago now, I think it was last March, we had that torrential rain here in Baltimore, and shortly into that rain, we actually got a call from Fox 45 letting us know that 26th Street tunnel there for the train tracks had actually just collapsed. And they wanted to know if we could go out and shoot some. Actually, it was the Baltimore Sun that had called. We were doing an interview with Fox 45 at the time that they called. It was a little weird. But we went out, as soon as it stopped raining, obviously we couldn't fly in the rain. These things, electronics don't like rain too much. So the next morning, as soon as it stopped raining, we went out, and this is the shot that we were able to get, among others. We were able to safely stand off on the sidelines. We worked with the police and the safety inspectors there in the area. They provided a nice safe place off to the side where we could take off and land from, where others weren't going to be in our way. And we were able to get these shots, and they went out through a bunch of different media outlets. And in fact, the Weather Channel just picked up the video that we shot with this for a show coming up that's, I forget the name, but it's something crazy like, when wild weather attacks and probably kills you and the rest of your family or something along those lines.
So if you think about this shot compared to what a manned helicopter would get, we like to say that it's above a crane and below a plane. That's sort of that sweet spot where you can position the camera in any location you want in that realm and be able to get high resolution, nice detailed, crisp shots of things that you ordinarily wouldn't be able to really zoom in on.
And, kind of speaking to the matter that was brought up earlier with the video that Shine Creative put together, wonderful video, by the way. Right after the Freddie Gray riots, there was a building in East Baltimore, which we still don't quite know if it was linked or not. I don't think they figured that out yet. But regardless, it was set on fire. And that was one of the biggest blazes Baltimore has seen in a number of years. We went out the next morning. It's kind of hard to tell in this photo, but some of the debris there still smoldering off in the background. They were definitely keeping people out of this area. They wanted to keep it clear. They weren't quite sure what was going on. If this were exposed a little bit better with the projector, you could actually see some of the damage. But the only thing that survived were the concrete, the block stairwells. The whole rest of the building was studded up in 2x4s and paneling ready to be covered. And it was pretty unfortunate. With some of the things, just on a side note, we actually saw there was so much heat that was generated by this fire. We saw buildings a block away that had bump out windows that had been covered at one point in aluminum siding, and they were melting, and you could see where it dripped. And at one point in mid-drip, it cooled to the point where it solidified, and it looked like a stalactite or stalagmite. I always forget which one they are that comes from the top. But it was just hanging, and it was surreal to see that. I mean, the damage that was done. But we were able to get that shot safely with the drone. So kind of the technology background, a lot of people always ask us, how did we get here? What happened? People look at these and they think of, maybe the RC airplane that your father, grandfather, great-grandfather, they've been around for a long time, may have flown in the past. How did we get here? Well, there's a few key things that have happened, and we won't go too deep into this, but we did feel it was important to bring this up. Number one, there were a few advancements in both the automotive and computer industries that propelled miniaturizations of certain types of sensors, particularly MEMS sensors. It's the miniature mechanical sensors. First, they were used in airbags in cars, and later on in your cell phone, tablet, Nintendo Wii, all those cool little gadgets that make your phone, figure out which orientation you have, the accelerometer, the gyroscope, all those things are actually, once they came down small enough and cheap enough, we were actually able to put them into the flight control systems that make this possible. 5 years ago, those flight controls were as big as a brick, and the military were the only ones that could afford them. Certainly nobody in the private sector. Digital cameras is also another big piece there. Obviously, one of the most popular payloads that are carried on these are cameras. And with the GoPro and things of that nature, and once again, the smartphone industry, the mobile industry, shrinking those cameras down in size, we were able to get them small enough, light enough, cheap enough, so that we could send those up. And if we found one of those gravity hotspots we like to talk about, and it damaged the camera, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. We certainly wouldn't want to send up a $10,000 camera on our first run, though. So you kind of need to have that cheaper entry point. And finally, GPS. That is probably hands down the biggest thing that makes this technology possible. What we have available to us with the use of GPS is advanced navigation. There are several types of drones out there. In fact, well, none of them on this stage, but I do have some at home that don't have GPS in them. They're a lot of fun. You can race them. They're totally manual controlled, but once you have GPS in the system, then you can have things like position hold, altitude hold, waypoint navigation, autopilots, things of that nature. So it really kind of ramps up the technology.
How some of the ways that we use this technology has evolved over the last 5 years. Of course, we did start with aerial photography, and that was just little by little building up with that.
With Belinda being an artist, we like to have stuff to hang on the walls, so she was really pushing for the photos.
Sure. Real quick, Terry put a keychain camera on a store-bought helicopter, and we lived in Bolton Hill at the time, 14-foot ceilings, and immediately, as soon as I saw the terrible photos, I thought, oh, wow, bird's eye perspective. Oh, my God, we have to carry a better camera. So we got a GoPro for Christmas, and, it went on internet immediately, and that was another amazing thing with the maker movement and just being able to get online and share plans, open source plans, and people from all over the world being so generous with their ideas and their work. And it was an amazing collaborative effort with people that we had never met and have actually made friends with.
And just on one quick side note, I swore to her when she bought that first GoPro that it was only going to take 1 weekend of time to build this, and it was only going to cost $150. And 5.5 years later, we're standing on the stage in front of you. So
we're never satisfied. Okay. So
actually back up that one.
Yeah.
So we just kind of briefly touched on the body of work, and we released the photo book. That was another early way that we were using this.
And then eventually we were able to move into videography and cinematography. And the main difference that led us to be able to jump into that realm was the camera mount, the gimbal or camera mount that you see on the one on the right is positioned in front. The one on the left would normally be positioned underneath. And the difference there is that the ability to move the camera mount used to be controlled by servos. And now they have brushless motors. It's a much smoother transition from position to position, and it just gives you a lot of precise control for the camera.
Yeah, that was definitely a milestone. If you go back and if you could watch through a timeline of YouTube of drone videos, you would see they suck, they suck, they suck. Hey, they're good. What happened here? And it was the brushless gimbal. And then finally, more recently, within the last couple of years, we started getting into mapping. There's a huge benefit to using this technology for mapping. One of the things that we're able to do is program a flight path with one of these, send it up, have it fly what's known as a lawnmower pattern back and forth while collecting an array of photos. And then once we get back down to the ground, we can actually start to stitch those photos together. First to create 2D maps, and then ultimately to create 3D models, which we'll show you an example of here in a moment. And in fact, we're going to show you some examples. First, there will be photos. This is actually, and just to start off, these will go through somewhat of a chronological timeline here. This was one of our earlier photos. This is the Patterson Park Pagoda. And as many of you have probably seen this before, I mean, this thing has been subject matter in countless artists' photos, paintings, sketches, probably finger painting, you name it, and this somehow or another somebody's created this. Macaroni art, I'm sure. But nobody's ever, prior to this, as far as we know, nobody was ever able to capture this particular perspective. And it's what really highlights what the pagoda was always designed for to begin with, which was supposed to be an outlook over the city. And this is one of the first photos where you can actually see the city in the background rather than looking up the hill at the pagoda and kind of just seeing nothing but sky in the background. This one actually ended up in National Geographic magazine. We thought it was a joke at first when they contacted us, but it turned out to be real. I don't know if it's the first drone photo that was ever published in National Geographic, but as far as I know, it's probably the first what we call droney, because if you look down at the bottom, that's actually me sitting on the steps taking a picture of myself. Just happens to be a pagoda in the background.
He's wearing FPV goggles, first person view. That was before I had my own controller, so I was the spotter. And that was a golden hour early in the morning. That's one thing to take note of with these urban shots. This is all very early in the morning on the weekend, very little activity outdoors, so safety and responsible flight is #1 priority.
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on that. That's always something that we take very serious. Now that it's the two of us, we'll oftentimes bring a third person out just to keep an eye on what's going on around us, make sure that we're not flying over top of people or there's not somebody getting in the way or whatever may pop up. We need to have a third set of eyes. This was another early shot. This is right around the corner from us, George Washington Monument. Until recently, people hadn't really seen him from this perspective. Now he's been 3D scanned. Our good friends at Direct Dimensions actually got up on the scaffolding when it was up and scanned him. And I know Wesley was part of the team that put the new time capsule in, and there was a 3D print of this actually put in that time capsule. But this was one of those examples where we had to wait for the technology to catch up with our ambitions. We set the milestone of trying to shoot him before GPS was available for these. And it was very difficult to shoot this without GPS, so we actually waited for that to become available. Once we got GPS in one of these, we were able to practice for a couple months until we felt confident, and then we went right up and got this, and it was really not that big of a deal. But this was the first time he was ever shot face to face. The first thing that struck me as odd about this is how little his feet are, because he was always meant to be observed from the ground. So it's this matter of perspective where his feet look normal from the ground, but when you look at him face to face, he looks like he would fall over.
That would be called reverse foreshortening, Derry.
Thank you, art teacher.
And then the bow guy. Just want to point out about this again, early morning, but it kind of gives that dirty, kind of gritty feel for Baltimore, which a lot of people just really appreciate in this shot. And it really speaks to the technology itself as far as the treatment of the imagery. It gives a sort of a surreal kind of feel to it, and I love that. That's my favorite style of art. So anything kind of mysterious that gives a kind of a feeling and a tone to the imagery is really special to me.
And this one was, we were on family vacation. This is the New River Gorge Bridge in Fayetteville, West Virginia. It's kind of a famous bridge. It's been photographed a number of times. We wanted to put our own little spin on it. It's one of my personal favorites, and this is one of Belinda's personal favorites.
Yeah, this is one that I definitely wanted to get for a long time, but I knew that the conditions had to be just right, particularly with the wind, because you want the wind to make the flags flop around and fly, but you don't want too much wind that you're going to end up, being dangerous at all, especially in an urban environment. And this, believe it or not, was early, and there weren't very many people out. I think there's commuters mostly going on with the cars, but there were a couple people underneath the umbrellas, and I actually did approach them and let them know who we were and what we were doing, and asked them if they wanted to be in the shot, and gave them the opportunity to not be in the shot if they didn't want to, and even got permission from the security guards and the police officers that were on hand. And that's why I say that Baltimore has just been so supportive of this technology.
And we were actually back a little further than it looks. This is a cropped shot, so it's a little misleading. But, and of course, another big iconic scene here in Baltimore, the Domino's Sugar sign. And you can't look at anything that says Baltimore without thinking of Natty Boh and Crabs, Old Bay, and finally Domino's Sugar. So this is one of our favorites. We did this one a little while back with actually a modified GoPro, and we've got plans to go back and reshoot this one with some of the newer cameras.
The magic hour.
Yeah.
Just after sunset.
Yeah, we actually waited. We sat there and waited for about 2 hours for the light to come on, but then for the city not to be, encased in darkness yet. So there's just about a 15-minute window where you can hit that shot. And
Right, so the cover of the book, Drone Art Baltimore, was released in 2013, and when we started this in 2010, we lived on Utah Place, which is where the Francis Scott Key Monument is located, and that served as our proving ground. So from Terry's first wooden tricopter, that was the first one he built, was out of wood from Home Depot. You know, just being able to get off the ground and then a little higher and a little higher each time. So this one is particularly probably at like 40 to 50 feet, probably about 45 feet. And so after all of those years, once we built up that body of work, we knew that the Francis Scott Key Monument had to be the cover of the book.
so years later, we actually went back and reshot it with
Canon?
it was actually with the Sony that's over there. That's on front of Cygnus, but it was on a different copter.
I thought it was the S90. Excuse me.
It's okay. So yeah, some video, that kind of brings us up to about 2013 or so. Then more recently we started working on kind of more cinematic style video. This is something that's very new. We actually just shot this in April. This is a video that we did of Ocean City, Maryland. Like many people here in Maryland, we actually go out to Ocean City quite a bit. And we shot this with the Inspire, and just to speak to how good the Inspire works, we literally took this out of the box in Ocean City for the very first time, fired it up, made sure it was calibrated, and then made this video. So let's have a quick look. Wouldn't be Ocean City without a Fager sunset, right?
Thank you.
Okay, we have another quick video to show for you. This one we actually worked on with the Shine Creative team. We just contributed the aerial shots to this. Drew and the rest of the team actually did a fantastic job shooting the rest of this. But one thing to point out is that some of these shots that we actually got, we worked with Drew on to almost simulate what you would normally achieve with a dolly or a jib or even a crane. And so a lot of our shots are actually low aerial. They might only be 10 feet off the ground, but we're still flying in a manner that would be very difficult to rig. And we were able to set up and get it in a matter of just minutes. So we'll show this one now.
Indulge all 5 senses in Maryland.
Thanks. Yeah, and that one is actually airing, I believe it just started this week. There are a couple different versions of that, so keep an eye out. I know we were watching Mass a couple weeks ago, and we saw it 4 times in 45 minutes. And we talked about the mapping that we do. So one of the big things that we started to really get into and work with, we were fortunate enough to have a company local to us in Owings Mills called Direct Dimensions, who Michael Raphael, if any of you know the CEO, the owner, fantastic guy. He actually took us under his wing a little bit last year and showed us how some of this technology works and advised us that there's some overlap between what he does and what we do. And we started working together on some projects. And early on, we found some quick success here. This is actually an example of just a quick screenshot of one of the models that we created. We both grew up in Aberdeen, Maryland, and this is an old B&O train station that was in the process of being moved. You see it's up on stilts right now. And there was some risk that it may not make it through the process. So we wanted to document it before any potential problems happened. So we actually went out, we were able to capture this model in 8 minutes. It would have taken, a traditional team, several hours, if not the entire day, to do this. So you can see how we zoom in, and we can actually get such a level of detail that you can do roof inspections, which we've since done since we kind of did this as a proof of concept. We've done roof inspections on the high buildings, things of that nature. And it really allows you to kind of go in and capture things and document stuff very quickly. At least the capture portion is very quickly. There's still a processing time involved, but that's minimal. So that's an example of the 3D modeling. So what's next? Everybody always asks us. We've seen this technology kind of come up. It's kind of in its infancy. I like to compare these now to that big, huge, fat brick Radio Shack mobile phone from the 80s that you always see in the throwback movies. 10 years from now, we're going to see probably the nice new little iPhone, the first generation iPhone version of these. And there's a lot of things that are going to happen. But number one, we always see a lot of parallels in the mobile industry compared to the drone industry. And one of the things that is just now happening is, just like in 2008 with the mobile industry, some of the big manufacturers are just now releasing the software development kits, or what's commonly referred to as an SDK. Those are just now going out onto the market. DJI, we can actually write software for this guy, and I have lost many hours of sleep already doing so. There's a couple of other models out there. 3D Robotics is another great one that allows you to, the little guy in the middle, we've been starting to write software for him. And that is going to power the community to take control and start making these things do stuff that we've never thought of.
So you can use GPS technology to use a navigation software to program a flight path. So you have position point A, and then you want to send it to position point B over here. But if you have an obstacle in between, a tree, a large building, something of that nature, a power pole,
another drone,
then at this point, well, not at this point, but up until very recently, then the drone would not be able to know that it's there and then be able to re-navigate around that object, that obstacle. So at this point, the big push behind that was probably Google and Amazon, of course, with their desire to do the delivery service using UAVs. And so now they've done a ton of research and development and testing on sense and avoid technology. So that has been the big hurdle to overcome to be able to see drones used for cargo purposes.
Yeah, and if you think of it kind of like 4 sets of eyeballs that look out from the 4 major compass points, that's what we're looking at. It's sonar that points out, and it can tell if there's something maybe 20 feet or 30 feet in front of it, and it stops and starts to think about it for a little while. It's kind of funny to watch.
Yeah, so being able to, as Terry mentioned with the software development kits, at this point, young students who are just learning how to code can actually then apply that coding knowledge to UAVs, and they will be able to make their UAVs do whatever it is that they conceive them to do. Another big thing is having a swarm of smaller UAVs work in tandem together to perform other tasks, or even just do a visual performance in a show, which exists out there. So, really there's so many puns in this, but the sky is truly the limit as far as what the possibilities are.
Yeah, I hear this technology is really taking off.
Yeah, it sure is. And then just also to mention with STEM, we've done some maker camps and again, the maker movement, and this is just so important. And so our next book is not a photo book, it's an instructional book, and that is made possible through Make Media, O'Reilly Publishing, known for their technical books, and so that should be out in July. It's on Amazon now, speaking of Amazon, for pre-order, but we're very excited about that. It's step-by-step, full-color photos. They have a series called Getting Started With, so it's getting started with getting started with drones, and we actually use the Little Dipper as the example in the book to be able to, describe step by step how to build it. And so, this is a theory, but you can apply the information to whatever type of drone you want to build. And as you see, there are different designs up here. So whatever your application, your function, whatever the purpose you want to use your drone for, that's going to dictate what type of design that you go with.
Okay, and with that, I think we're running a little bit over on time, but we did want to open it up for Q&A. There's always a question or two about this, and I guarantee you're going to be home tonight, lying in bed. That's when you're going to come up with the best question. So we're going to post our social media up there in a minute, and you can fire us off an email at 2 o'clock in the morning if you like. But if there's any questions now, we will take a few.